What's the point of a stance?
A certain kind of observation, a certain way of looking at things which might be typified by the image of a heron standing at the edge of the water, as in this painting, which is by the great Japanese artist Kano Motonobu. There is the heron standing quietly and serenely, watching the water.
Hi there. What is the stance? John Vervaeke established the term, which is now primary and soon to be iconic in this little corner, in my opinion. We already know Jonathan Pageau's stance, which is attention to the highest, to Christ, an embodiment of God that we should imitate. So here we see John Vervaeke's stance. It is, of course, primarily Eastern, as the martial arts from which he has derived this stance. Why do the Eastern martial arts approach in such a way? Because the stance is one that is ready for what should present itself and ready to optimally grip, as he says. I showed a little clip from Alan Watts at the beginning of this video, so let him finish his thought here.
So, you remember then that heron I showed you. When that heron was watching for fish, it wasn't sort of going like this, looking all over the place for what, like, fish here, fish here. No, heron is just quiet like this. And as it were, the whole area of vision is simply coming to the heron's eyes. And the moment it sees a ripple in the water, it darts down and gets the fish.
So there is an Eastern, let's say, harmony-oriented stance of non-judgment, and let's define judgment as active decision-making, not an open heart. Knowing, not judging, would be the stance that we're talking about. So the Eastern stance is one of harmony.
So think about all the optimal grippings I can have. The stance puts me in an optimal place to get to any of those optimal gripping. Do you understand?
We practice it with presence. Its structure is non-duality. There's another side to the stance, and that's the one that Jonathan talks about, which is attending, orientation to the highest.
That is, love is the thing that draws you towards the good.
In a way, estuary itself accepts that there's sort of a separation in transcendent belief systems. That in a way these systems they're different, but estuary is so powerful because there's dialogos between the two stances. One stance is looking upward towards Christ, the other is surrendering to the harmony of being. So in the Persig canon, one stance is dynamically social, and the other is pure dynamism. What do I mean by social? Well, the Christian stance, which Jonathan and Paul subscribe to, is an imitation of Christ. And that is the perfection of the social being, the perfect human being in our eyes. The Eastern stance, the dynamic stance, is more what John's talking about, which is following the way of being, the Tao. Persig himself, of course, was in the second category. He practiced Zen in order to connect directly with dynamic quality, or the One, or Brahma, or the ground of being. It is a dissolution of the conceptual. So listen to what he says here. And this is from chapter 4 of On Quality, and the name of the chapter is Dharma. So in that chapter he talks a lot about Persig's actual practices, the Zen practices. The best way of investigating quality that I know of is the brilliant Oriental technique of Zazen. Zazen is Zen meditation, which defines dynamic quality very precisely by forcing a subtraction of static intellectual patterns for it, rather than adding new ones. So that means that in Eastern meditation, you are getting, you are connecting to the dynamic quality itself, and you're connecting through, the patterns, the conceptual patterns dissolve, and that is the point of Eastern meditation. But in both modes, there is one necessity, and that is attention. In the Eastern stance, that attention is to the present moment. In the Western stance, that attention is to the highest good in Christ, or the Christian stance. And in both of these stances, there's nothing more important than that attention. The attention is unconditional, pure love. In both cases, that attention is what you would call agape. So, agape, to be one, let's say, with agape, that unconditional pure love, is a mystical stance. Now that mystical stance, where we're filled with love, actually crosses the boundary between the two stances. And maybe this is the one that we can think about cultivating between us. So Persic says, the term love sometimes refers to a biological emotion, but at other times it refers to a dissolution of the separation between subject and object. In the second instance, love seems identical to the perception of quality. So you could say, you can also, and Persic has suggested this, you can replace the word quality with God. It is in this stance that we know God. Tattvam Asi. If I were to predict, this inquiry into the stance is going to be as important an inquiry as has been in our little corner. It is a crowning corner concern.
Like, what is it that draws you towards something else? And then you say, well, that's love.
So I hope that makes sense, and I'll see you next time.